My son handed me a letter at Sunday lunch and said, "Dad, we are taking over the business you built." I have been ambushed in a boardroom. I have been lowballed by suppliers who thought I did not know my own numbers. I once had a city official show up at my plant on a Friday afternoon at 4:45 with a clipboard and an attitude. And I will tell you that man did not have a good weekend. But nothing in 30 years of running a business prepared me for my own son sliding a manila envelope acro SS the Sunday roast and telling me it was time. Welcome to Revenge Stories. Drop a comment and make sure to subscribe. You are going to love it here. My name is Lionel Marsh. I am 63 years old. I have owned and operated Marsh Precision Manufacturing in Welland, Ontario for just over 30 years. We make industrial components for the automotive and aerospace supply chain, 41 employees, 3 production shifts, 1 loading dock on the south end of the building that has needed replacing since 2017 and refuses to accept that reality. I have made peace with the loading dock. We have an understanding. I have also been married to Miriam for 34 years. She is 60. She ran the business accounts for 11 of those years. And she is the reason the books looked the way they did when we finally hired someone to take that over. I will say this carefully because she sometimes watches these things. She is sharper than me. She has always been sharper than me. I knew it when I married her, and I married her anyway because I am not an idiot. Before I tell you what I did next, tell me where you are watching this from. I would love to know. We have one son. Spencer is 37. He joined the business 8 years ago after spending a few years at a parts distributor in Hamilton. I was proud when he came on, genuinely proud. He was good with people, learned the floor faster than I expected, and asked questions that told me he was paying attention. His wife Nadine is 34. She works in corporate communications. She is very good at making things sound more official than they are. I noticed that the first time I heard her describe a neighborhood barbecue as a community engagement initiative, I filed that away. I file a lot of things away. I have a small notebook in my shirt pocket that I have carried for 22 years. And I write things in it that I do not want to forget. It is battered and unglamorous. And Miriam has tried to replace it for times with something nicer. I keep losing the nicer ones. The first sign came about 14 months before the Sunday in question. Spencer started asking different kinds of questions. Not about production or clients or the supply chain, about structure, about ownership. Whether the business was held personally or through a corporation, whether I had updated my will, whether I had ever thought seriously about stepping back. I told him I thought about stepping back the way I thought about the loading dock. I knew it needed to happen eventually. I was not ready to have the conversation. He nodded. Nadine, who was sitting across from us at the time, nodded about a half second after him. I noticed that. I wrote it down that evening. Not because I knew what it meant yet, just because I noticed things. The second sign was at their house in December. Nadine said over dinner that she had been reading about family business succession and how founders sometimes struggle to let go even when it is in everyone's interest. She said it gently. She said it the way someone says something they have been practicing in the car on the way over. I thanked her for the thought. I had another piece of her roast chicken, which was genuinely very good. I told her so. She smiled, and I could not tell whether she was pleased or recalibrating. In January, Spencer began copying himself on correspondence he had no operational reason to see. Purchase orders, the renewal paperwork on our secondary unit on Niagara Street, an email thread with our primary steel supplier about a pricing adjustment. I asked him once why he was copying himself on the Niagara lease. He said he just liked to stay informed. I said that was fine. I wrote it in the notebook. The Sunday lunch happened on March the 2nd. Miriam made a pot roast. Spencer and Nadine arrived at noon with a bottle of red wine and a manila envelope that Spencer set on the table beside his bread plate like it was a napkin he had forgotten to unfold. We ate. The food was good. We talked about nothing important for 40 minutes. And I remember thinking that the conversation felt slightly too smooth. Like everyone at the table except Miriam and me had agreed in advance on what not to say. Then Spencer set down his fork and said, "Dad, I want to talk about the business." And he pushed the envelope toward me. I picked it up. I opened it. 3 pages, proper margins, numbered paragraphs, language about sweat equity contributions and oral agreements, and something called equitable entitlement to ownership interest. I read it slowly. The whole thing. I knew within the first paragraph that no lawyer had written it. There was no firm letterhead, no file number, no reference to any actual provision of the Ontario Business Corporations Act or any other statute that existed. It was a document written by 2 intelligent people who had read enough legal language to sound like something without being anything. Nadine had written most of it. I could tell by the phrasing. I read to the end. I folded it along Its original crease. I put it in my shirt pocket next to my notebook. I picked up my fork and finished my roast. Spencer said, "Do you have any questions?" I said. "Not right now." He looked at Nadine. Nadine looked at the table. Miriam looked at me and said nothing, which is how I knew she had already understood everything. I had another potato. It was a good potato. I made a note to tell Miriam that later. I did not say anything else about the letter that afternoon, neither did they. We finished lunch. Spencer helped clear the table, which he always does, and I noticed he kept glancing at my shirt pocket. Nadine offered to help Miriam with the dishes, and Miriam said she was fine, thank you, with a warmth that was technically perfect and communicated nothing at all. They left at 2:30. I stood at the front window and watched their car back out of the driveway. Then I sat down in the kitchen. Miriam came in and sat across from me and did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "How bad is it?" I said, "It is not bad. It is nothing." She said, "Show me." I put the letter on the table. She read it without speaking. When she finished, she put it back down and she said, "Lionel, this is not written by a lawyer." I said, "I know." She said, "Spencer knows better than this." I said, "I know." She looked at the letter again and then she said quietly, "I did not think it would be him." And that was the part that sat with me later that night, not the letter, that line. I did not think it would be him because neither did I, not really. Not fully. I called Dennis Yao at 8 o'clock that evening. Dennis and I have been friends since 1991. We met at a Chamber of Commerce breakfast where we were the two youngest people in the room, and spent most of it talking to each other by the coffee station because neither of us knew anyone else. He owns a commercial tile business in St. Catharines, and he is the person I call when I need someone who will not soften what needs to be said. I read him the letter over the phone. The whole thing. He did not interrupt once, which, if you know Dennis, is genuinely remarkable. When I finished, he was quiet for a second and then he said, "Is this real?" I said, "Yes." He said, "They gave you this at Sunday lunch?" I said, "Yes." He said, "At Miriam's roast?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Lionel, I have to tell you something." I said, "What?" He said, "Your son has nerve." I said, "I know." He said, "Where do you think he got it?" I did not answer that. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to call Patricia in the morning." He said, "Good." Then he said, "Call me after." I said, "I will." He said, "Eat something tonight." I said, "I had a very good roast this afternoon." "Dennis," he said, "that is not what I meant." "I know. I ate something." Patricia Inge has been my corporate lawyer for 16 years. She is 52. She is precise the way good instruments are precise. And she has a way of delivering bad news about other people's situations with a calm that makes you feel the problem is already being solved. I called her Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning. She picked up on the second ring. I told her everything and photographed each page of the letter and sent it to her. While we were still on the phone, she called back at 10:20 and said, "Lionel, not a single claim in this document is legally supportable." I said, "I know." She said, "There is no verbal agreement that could constitute an ownership arrangement under Ontario law without corroborating evidence, which does not exist here." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Patricia, I had an excellent roast on Sunday and I am completely fine." She said, "Good." She said, "Let me get to work." Over the following 8 days, Patricia conducted a full legal audit of Marsh Precision Manufacturing. Sole ownership confirmed in my name across every registered document, every asset, every account. Spencer's employment history showed 8 years of salaried work and annual performance bonuses. That is an employment relationship. It is not a partnership. It is not partial ownership. It is not anything the letter claimed it was. Patricia drafted a response for pages, real citations, real statutory references, a paragraph-by-paragraph answer to every claim Spencer and Nadine had made. I will not read the whole thing, but I will tell you her closing paragraph noted that should Mr. Spencer Marsh wish to pursue legitimate succession discussions in the future, his father remained open to that conversation conducted through proper legal channels at an appropriate time. I told her that closing paragraph was the best thing she had ever written. She said she was aware. At the same time, Patricia began drawing up a formal succession trust on my retirement or in the event of my incapacity. The business transfers to the trust. 3 trustees, Miriam, Dennis, and a business associate of 26 years named Harold Fitch, who has never once in my memory said anything that was not exactly true. Spencer is not named anywhere in the trust documents. Nadine is not mentioned. This is not punishment. It is the appropriate and permanent consequence of handing your father a fabricated legal document over his wife's pot roast. Spencer received Patricia's letter on March the 12th. He called me that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. He called again the next morning. I let that go, too. He left a message on the second call that started with, "Dad, I think we need to talk," and ended somewhere near, "I never meant for any of this," and there was something in the middle. That was close to an apology. I listened to it twice. I did not call back that week. I called him 3 weeks later. We met at a diner on King Street, where I used to take him on Saturday mornings when he was learning to drive and needed somewhere to sit quietly and recover from the experience. I ordered coffee, he ordered tea. He looked like someone who had not been sleeping well, and I was not glad about that. "He is still my son, that has not changed," he said. "Dad, I thought you would just eventually step back, and I wanted it in writing before anything happened." I said, "I understand that." He said, "Nadine thought if we put it formally, you would take it more seriously." I said, "Spencer, what you handed me was designed to pressure me before I could think clearly." He looked at the table. He said, "I know." Then he said something I did not expect. He said, "I thought you would get upset at the table. I thought if you reacted, we could just talk through it." Right there, I looked at him for a moment. I said, "Spencer, I have been running a business for 30 years. I have never once made a good decision when I was reacting." He looked up. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. I told him the trust was in place. I told him what it meant. I told him that if he wanted to be part of the business going forward, in an honest way, then that was a conversation we could have on my terms through Patricia when he was ready. He nodded. He did not argue. He looked like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just been told he could set it down, even if setting it down did not feel the way he thought it would. I drove home. Miriam was at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and a book she was not really reading. She looked up. I said, "We are going to be fine." She said, "I know." She got up and made me a cup of tea without asking and set it in front of me and sat back down. We did not talk for a few minutes. Then she said, "You know, the loading dock company called again." I said, "I know." She said, "Lionel, you have to call them back." I said, "I have been saying that since 2017. She said, "And the dock has been deteriorating since 2017. I said, "The dock is fine." She said, "The dock is not fine." I picked up my notebook. I wrote, "Call the dock company." I showed it to her. She looked at it. She said, "You wrote that in November." I looked at the page. She was right. I turned to a fresh page and wrote it again. She shook her head. I drank my tea. It was a good cup of tea.